For the average software development team in the tech industry, remote work is not an entirely new concept. Some roles have long worked fully remote. However, COVID-19 has forced dev teams to change the way they manage the processes from home. This panel will dive into common challenges from working from home, and some other solutions. My name is Devon Singh. I'm a lead UX research at Capital One, and I'll be your moderator today. I want to take a moment to meet our panelists today. So if you could please state your name, role, and current company.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kanika Tolver. I am a senior project manager at the Department of Treasury in Washington, D.C.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kwesi Ames. I'm the Vice President of Site Reliability Engineering here at Salesforce. And I lead a global team of engineers responsible for the day-to-day operations of some of your very favorite products.
Cool. Thank you both for joining me today. Again, today we're going to be talking about three topics about people, processes, and technologies during this whole COVID-19 era. Okay, so we're going to jump right in. The first question I have for both of you is, what do you do to work effectively during this time? And I know it's a very broad question, but just think about this in general. What do you do to increase the effectiveness of your work during this time?
So what I do to work effective, I try to make sure that I have a to-do list. I kind of prioritize my tasks for the day. I attend a lot of meetings as a project manager, and there's a lot of other administrative things that I do. So for me, having a to-do list every day and being able to accomplish things is very important for me and my team. And also I try to also create boundaries for myself. So I try to make sure that meetings and the things that I do have purpose and they're meaningful, because time is very limited with us, working from home. So I don't want to waste, my team members' time, and I don't want to waste my time. So those are two things that has been really helpful for me on working from home.
Okay. And how about you?
So, that's so as a leader, my concern was around, how to, keep my people safe. So, how do they are able to do their jobs and protect the environment as we normally would. So it really sort of started with, self-care for them and understanding what they needed to be effective at home, face the challenges of maybe that additional feeling of isolation, that additional feeling of loneliness or disconnectedness. And so being intentional about creating those connections digitally, for a team that was used to sort of, communicating in the same room on a day-to-day basis, now they have to figure out how to communicate digitally on a long-term extended basis. So it really, we have to form intentional ways to take time to take care of each other and themselves, and then take time to find effective ways to communicate in a real-time way so they could do their jobs effectively and, stay connected.
Cool, and that goes right into the second question, which was, so the first one was about working effectively. The next question was, how do you manage work-life balance while at home?
That's a really good question. So for me, it's important that I, wake up at a really good time. Instead of waking up as soon as I'm supposed to log on, I try to wake up an hour or two before so I can get things done around the house, so I can work out, so I could, I'm still a wife, so I still have other duties and responsibilities like, meal prepping and things like that. So for me, it's important to, have that extra padded time before I dive into working with my team. Another thing that I've decided to do is I've decided to, create times on my calendar that are for me, whether it's to see my therapist, whether it's to have doctor appointments, via video, because my doctor's appointments have turned into video calls or phone calls. I think it's important to protect your mental health right now. And it's important to also to figure out, what are your triggers? So for me, I've just been being more conscious and paying attention to the things that I didn't have the time to pay attention to when I was going back and forth and commuting. So I think it's really, having some self-care time on the weekends has really been important to me, outside of, sitting on the computer for 9 to 10 hours a day, 5 days a week. So those are a few things that I have been doing and encouraging my team members to do.
Yeah, it's a fantastic challenge, you know. So, you know, when we were all working together, you know, you take for granted sort of the impromptu opportunities to take breaks. And at home, you sort of, you know, sometimes you can forget to do that. So being deliberate about scheduling breaks throughout the day, being deliberate about taking time away. Don't use your what used to be your commute time as your work time. So taking that time off to, you know, for yourself and time with your family, I thought was really important. And then Kanika, you alluded to this earlier, and being really deliberate with your meetings, you know, because now you don't have that ability to meet with people impromptu. Everything's a meeting. Has to be scheduled.
Right.
So your calendar and your time, your free time could get eaten up very quickly. So being really smart about the outcomes you want out of your meetings and working towards that and sticking towards it.
That's good advice. I actually find myself, I could use both of that advice myself, because I find myself working more in this era. Like I find like I don't set those boundaries. And to be completely frank, like I find myself, you know, working more hours. Like I forget to eat lunch, and my wife has to like knock on the door and say, "Hey babe, did you eat?" Like reminding me, because I'm not setting those boundaries. So these are both like really good advice. We talked about, you know, the idea of mental, you know, mental like being and well-being. What are you both doing to manage your mental well-being, like while you're at home?
For me, you know, this journey of being at home has allowed me to really think a lot about myself and the things that I was putting off. I was putting off some healing that I needed to do just for myself. So recently I just enrolled working with a therapist that's helping with my anxiety. I'm an overachiever, so I'm very type A. I like everything to go right. So sometimes I have anxiety. So for me, I've really been focusing on that because I think when you're working, you don't really realize that there are things happening to you that could cause depression or anxiety or stress, and you're just going through the motions because you're just so busy. Another thing that I've done is I've tried to focus on my spirituality. You know, being a Christian, I've tried to focus on that morning time that we talked about earlier, is having some devotion and having some meditation, being mindful. Like mindfulness is such an important concept for me right now. And those are the things that I have been doing. And working out, like just getting outside when it's not too hot and getting some sweat in and get some vitamin D has really helped, because I think, like you said, we sit at our computers and we forget to take lunch and we forget to go take a break on our deck or go for a walk. So those are the things that have been really helping me during this time.
You know, for me, it's been a lot around, you know, exercise, right? You know, taking time to, you know, de-stress, right? So I really I've taken up biking. So my wife and I go riding you know, a couple of times a week, and it's been really transformational. In addition to some of the other sort of calisthenics things we've started doing at home, and so you know, it really helps to, you know, help your mind diversify and not think about work all the time, because when you're exercising and in that zone, you're not thinking about work and you're letting your mind rest and recover. So that's been really helpful for me, is to not ignore the need for really a good, strong exercise routine.
Awesome. Yeah, I love seeing Black people talk about mental health, because like I feel like most of us can relate. We grew up in environments where, you know, talking about our feelings and talking to like a professional is considered like viewed as being weak, right? I know in my household, growing up in a West Indian family, you know, that's not something you talk about, right? Especially for like Black males. So I love to see the idea of like even going to talk to a therapist, and I think Black people should be doing that. So I'd love to hear that. And the exercise thing, I think, is huge. I think we all can go out there and get a little sweat. One thing I'm trying to do, because everybody ran out to Walmart and all these places and bought all the fitness equipment. I'm trying to find like dumbbells and stuff so I can like I have the TRX bands, but I'm trying to like, I feel like I've lost so much like weight, like because I've just been doing calisthenics a lot. So I need to, if you know anything, any place that's selling these things, let me know.
I will tell you, the notion that you need to buy a bunch of stuff to exercise is just not true, right? Your body weight's all you need. Yeah. And there's a ton of YouTube videos and people out there putting out free content and how you can do that. So find someone you like, follow them. That's how I've engaged. I follow a bunch of people online. I've got a bit of a fitness community here in my neighborhood that we get together. So, and we sweat and pant as if we had weight. So you can get involved in the kind of exercise you need without weight or spending $1.
Cool. So let's talk about, we've been talking about managing your being as a person. Let's talk about the atmosphere, right? How do you manage your home atmosphere during this time to keep it like a healthy atmosphere?
So me being married and both of us are working from home and both of us are in tech. My husband's in cybersecurity and I'm in software development. We have to create some boundaries for our workspace areas, right? Because he's on conference calls, I'm on conference calls. Sometimes I'm trying to listen to what I need to listen to, and then his call is going on at the same time. So I think it's important that we created, a place where we can both be able to work, and produce. Because I think we don't have children, so we don't have that issue of atmosphere with children, but we still both have competing deadlines and a lot of work that we're doing. So I think creating that comfortable space, we kind of re-evaluated the look and feel of our office. Sometimes I sit in the dining room area versus he goes into the office, just because we both are on calls at the same time and it's impossible for us to hear our calls both at the same time. One thing I decided to do is I decided to kind of focus on music. I think for me, I love music. I'm a big hip hop head. So for me, or just music in general. So sometimes having music playing in when I'm not on a call, it really helps me feel good about what I'm working on. So those are just a few things that I've decided to do, at home to kind of make me feel more comfortable.
Okay.
For me, it was important to have a space where I could concentrate and work. So, prior to this, I worked from home quite a bit. Occasionally I traveled a lot. So I was kind of used to, working from home when I needed to, or working from a hotel or remotely. So it was important to, it wasn't just about me anymore, right? My wife now is working from home. My sons were now schooling from home. And so the idea of having us all share the same house to effectively have calls and conversations in a productive way was something we had to be deliberate about, make sure there was enough audio spacing between us. And thinking of it not so much as working from home, but working with home, right? So you're in a space, you've got pets, you've got young kids that may be coming by. I try to make it really comfortable for people that I'm meeting with. It's okay if I see a head run by you or a cat jump on your desk. It makes it more comfortable, right? You don't have to be so anxious about putting on the perfect front. You know what I mean? So as long as when you're able to sort of produce, working with your home and your family members or your young kids that are around, I think it's cute to see my team members' daughters or pets every so often make an appearance. It's not interruptive. It's a very different space. We're going to be in this way for quite some time. So just being relaxed about, working with home, and the interruptions that can come from it, but being organized in a way and set up in a way that you can concentrate when you need to.
Yeah, I think as professionals, we often come to work and we only know the mask that we put on, right? I know with a lot of Black professionals, we in psychology, they talk about the concept of duality, right? Where we put on one mask to be very professional at work, and then we are a certain way at home, right? When we're around our people. I think the COVID era has really stripped away the duality and let people see who we are, right? You see, my wife's a performer and she'll be singing and stuff, right, with her students. She's a teacher in the back room, and she also teaches Zumba. So sometimes you could hear like, she's blasting soca music in the background. You could hear it, right? People, I'm in a business meeting, right? Because we live in New York City area. The walls are everything is so small. We don't have a big space yet. So I think this era has really, really like kind of smashed everything together, and it's hard to hide that duality. It's just you are who you are, right? So let's move on to the topic of communication, right? So we talked about like the person. Let's talk about the communication. I want to start off with talking about like just general team communication. So not necessarily like talking to leadership or any specificity, but just in general team communication. So, but what do you both do to effectively communicate with your teams in general right now?
Of course, I have incorporated more one-on-one tag ups with some of my team members that I probably would have done face to face by stopping by their cubicle or just talking to them in the office. So I have started to do that. I've started to incorporate making sure that I also effectively communicate through email and be responsive. I think, people, when they need an answer or they need help with something, sometimes it's just so easy to either pick up the phone sometimes. I've done that a lot more than I would normally do. It's just sometimes I just pick up the phone just to humanize the communication, or let's just get on Skype really quick, or let's just go ahead and knock it out. I think as a project manager for my role is your team wants to know that you care, and they want to know that you are, you're going to respond in a fast pace. Just because I'm working from home doesn't, allow me to have a delay in my response. So I think they definitely respect that. And then for the most part, of course, we have our daily Scrum meetings and stuff like that. So I've allowed that to kind of be an opportunity to go beyond the 15-minute rule, because if there are impediments or risks or issues that they want to talk about that goes beyond 15 minutes, I'm fine with like having it more like at a 30-minute time slot. And so they don't feel rushed with giving their updates or discussing something that is a blocker for them. So those are just a few things that I've incorporated with my team.
Okay. Some of the things from a common perspective, you lost a lot of your visual cues. So one of the techniques that we use is, if for my teams that are working together, they'll keep their video conference on, right? So they can see each other. They can see each other moving. They can talk. They can easily communicate. And so that's been really effective. If you're not in that situation, where you're working with a team, but, you set the expectation of how to best communicate with you, or let them know when you're taking a break, or you're not going to be at your desk, or you're stepping away, right? Those visual cues that are natural in the office setting isn't there here. So you have to be a little bit more intentional and deliberate about setting those expectations. So, being really, thinking about what are your business outcomes for your team, and how do you better collaborate on delivering those outcomes will define the kind of communications processes or times you need to set. And so being really with your end state outcome in mind, what opportunities do you and your team members need to connect most efficiently to achieve that, and then establish those times. And then, and then set the expectation for your team members if you're ever going to be away from your desk.
Okay. If we think about, like, we talked about general communication, but when we talk about like communicating with leadership, right? So it could be a direct leader, it could be senior leadership, like VP level. How do you both manage effective communication when you're talking between your team and leadership or senior leadership during this time?
So for me, I have a weekly tag up with my leader, with my manager. So we meet once a week on the same day, same time, for about 30 minutes. That has just been an amazing opportunity, not just to talk about the projects, but just to talk about how each other are doing during these times. I think he's been very open to ask me how my family is, how I'm doing, how my husband is doing. I talked to him about his family and his children. Sometimes we would have had these conversations face to face for extended times, or we may would have grabbed lunch together. So for me, it's also about not just talking about projects and talking about the work, but just talking about how are you doing and checking in, you know, because there's different things that are going on that people are concerned about. So another thing I did was my upper leadership, which is above my manager, I schedule office hours to talk about racism at work. There were an email that came out about, you know, we want to talk about, you know, these unrest times when George Floyd protest was going on. They sent out like an email to kind of, I guess, to open up, just to have the discussion. So I scheduled time to talk to my CTO about how would he handle racism at work, if I was a victim of racism at work, how as an organization would we deal with that? We had a very open, transparent conversation about it. He's a white male, so he felt like he wouldn't tolerate it, and he made me feel comfortable being a Black female in tech about this topic. And I felt so comfortable walking away with having a hard conversation that would have never really happened if the George Floyd protest and all of the, you know, uproar, you know, all of that happened. So I felt confident in my ability to be transparent in a very sensitive time. So.
Yeah, you know, reaching out to leadership and keeping them aware of activities is obviously business critical. So finding that one-on-one time, that skip level time with those leaders is important. But setting up established sort of recurring events that are predictable, right? So setting up forums that may not have been necessary before, but you know, weekly meetings to discuss Project X or all your projects for the department. That's been really important. Also having ways to reach out in an emergency, right, to find people. So, you can't walk to their office anymore. So maybe utilize instant messaging, where you can reach folks and you can get a hold of them in a more real-time way for urgent issues. So, having, being more disciplined to keep your time with your leadership and structuring that agenda about what you want to talk operationally, what you want to talk about your own career. Be deliberate about those two things, right? Your time with your leaders is very valuable. You want to make sure you're advocating for yourself and your work that you're doing, and you're also giving updates on the things that you're doing as well.
I want to switch over because, I know we only have about 10 to 12 minutes left. I want to talk, we've been talking about the people section. Let's move on to the process. So most development cycles consist of planning, development, testing, and deploying. So it may differ depending on your team, but those four things are pretty common. My question is, what has your team done to make sure these four processes are carried out effectively during these times? So again, it's kind of touching on like working effectively, but it's more specific to around planning, development, testing, and deploying.
One thing we've done is we've tried to focus on making sure that we capture requirements in a more accurate manner. I mean, I work building a lot of ServiceNow applications. I work on, Treasury.gov. Drupal is a Drupal CMS that we use for that. So when we're working with stakeholders, is making sure that when we have these online meetings, not just with the development team, but when we're meeting with the end users that we're building an application for, making sure that we really stay on target with capturing clear, concise, and unambiguous requirements, because that's going to affect development, testing, and deployment, right? If we don't capture the right things, then we're going to develop the wrong functionality. Another thing that we've done is we have really done a really good job at on a day-to-day basis having user acceptance testing check-in calls for like 15 minutes with our testers that we're building application for, and trying to find and gather that continuous feedback really early. So we do it every day we do our UAT testing period for 5 days, but every day we have like a 15-minute check-in call just to make sure that they're good, they didn't find anything, and making sure that they're okay with sending us daily updates if they find things that is not correct in the application, so we can correct it faster instead of like closer to the end of the project. So that's another thing that we just really have been normally these people will probably have been in the office with us, but we have to have them on our web meetings and things like that. So just keeping them engaged and letting them know that we want you to provide feedback quickly instead of too late at the end. So those are a few things I can just add to that question. So,
yeah, I mean, keeping connected to the things that we deliver. My team is largely operational and a bit of engineering as well. And, we are very deliberate about our meeting times being inclusive so that, when we do meet, we're creating space for those who may be shy or reticent to speak up, or there's too many people on the call that everyone doesn't get a chance to contribute. So, you've got the constructs, you've got the meetings to have the right discussions, but, you don't want to risk them not being fully inclusive and capturing the diverse set of perspectives that your team can offer. So taking that time to make sure that, everybody on the call has a moment that you create space if you're the moderator or facilitator, or if you're a participant and you realize one person is maybe being talked over on, or one person had a chance to contribute, you want to make sure that, everyone has a chance to speak up and address their role in the operation of the process and reporting what happened on their shift, or what happened, what's an update on that project, or what happened with that release, or what happened with that rollback. So everyone has a chance to speak and own a particular part of the operations process, and we create that space for them to. I think it's important to do that.
So we've been really focused on a lot of like, the positives that, some of the solutions that we've been able to employ during this time. But what are some common technological challenges with remote work?
I think some of the issues is that with remote work, you may have to sometimes, get on a nightly call because something happened and you may didn't catch it during the day. So it's just some things that you just have to like kind of adapt to. One thing that I've seen a lot with working remote is the technology of, managing different environments, from the development to the QA environments, to the test environments, and just making sure they're all synced up. Like recently we had a data problem, sometimes data ends up somehow mysteriously missing, in an application. So I think, making sure that all of the environments are synced up correctly, all the data is the integrity of the data that you're managing in these systems, they're correct and they're accurate. Making sure that as, we publish content to public facing websites, that the right approval has gone through and data isn't, wrongly published to treasury.gov is definitely another important thing, because when you're interfacing with the public, this is a very sensitive time that people are seeing things that the end user will see it probably before you see it, and I think it's important to be, doing quality work instead of quantity. Like, I think this is a time we have to be focused on not trying to do everything fast, because we're working from home. We just feel overwhelmed. And I think sometimes quality, it kind of gets missed in all of the things that you're doing. So I would say those are some of the technical things that I've seen that have gone wrong, on my team. But one thing we've done is we've created a team where people want to get involved and fix it fast. And I think that's the important thing. When technical things happen, we have to just work together to fix it fast.
Some of the things that I was most concerned about is connectivity, right? The ability to connect and do your job. So that's the biggest threat to at least my work, is the ability to get into the network. So we've made think about investments you can make in MiFi's, other ways to connect. If you're you have a backup way to get internet connectivity that's not dependent on your home infrastructure. Secondly, your IT systems, right? And you're probably connecting to your office through a VPN, right? What's the load look like? What does a peak load look like? Have you done drills to simulate, can you support the additional load of your entire workforce coming online at the same time? So those are things that you should look at to make sure that, you're anticipating or can anticipate the problems that can occur. And with your employees being able to get in. So looking at that whole system of how you connect securely into environments, make sure that's load tested, and it will meet the needs of your peak utilization.
Okay. And to wrap this up, I know we're kind of a little over time, but I have one last question, and again, it's about technology. What platforms or tools do you use to communicate and work effectively during these times? So not specifically, I want focus on the specific tool.
Some of the most popular tools that we have been using is Skype, GoToMeeting, WebEx for our online meetings. We record those. The great thing about gathering requirements and working with stakeholders and big teams is we can record and go back and listen to those. So we're not missing anything and make sure we heard what they said instead of having to continue to email back and forth. So those are some of the tools that we're using. SharePoint, just any Microsoft Office suite and things like that. For the most part, we're not allowed to use Slack. I wish we could use Slack, but because, in the government, we can't use Slack in that particular environment. But that is one tool that I wish that we could use to create different channels, to have different discussions with different groups of people. So those are the main tools that I can really think of.
Yeah. So from my perspective, we're making heavy use of Google Meet and Google Chat. And that works really, really effectively for us. We're able to, it's really useful. The intermission capability, as I mentioned earlier, around, you can communicate with your individuals or groups intentionally in a quick way. We use, obviously, video conferencing very effectively, very heavily. And what I love about what it's done, it's, before, remote participants were sometimes an afterthought in meetings. And, the attention was placed on the people in the room. Now that we're all remote, we don't have, the default consideration is what's the user experience like? What's the meeting experience like for people that are joining in that we want to hear from? So we've done a really good job of figuring out how to be more inclusive, and using the right views to surface, share content and collaborate and make sure we can see each other, cameras on and communicating and able to see facial expressions and that sort of thing. So it's making sure that you use the technology right. Video conferencing to me is useless if you don't turn on the camera. you lose that dimension of the way we communicate and read people's impressions and moods and feelings. So I think it's very effective, important to turn on your camera, make sure you don't have too much of an echo, and that sort of thing. So those considerations will make the technologies, regardless whatever it is, more super effective.
Yeah, plus one on all the tools that you both mentioned. One last tool that is kind of like a no-brainer that a lot of people overlook is just like the cloud, any type of like the Google Sheets and Google Drives, like those things in communication, because just being able to highlight something and comment something, right, without having to walk over to somebody or write them an email, that goes a long way to speeding things up. So that kind of marks the end of